Now, I want to take and start with a little bit of your comments. People are always asking me about how long it takes you to learn how to draw. And that's a sort of an open-ended question. Because when I was a kid, we had drawing classes at home. My father was a Sunday painter. My grandmother did a little drawing. And so I started out taking and practicing a lot. And so once I started school, I'd already been drawing, and I was taking drawing classes on Saturdays at art schools when I was in high school. So I did my first oil painting when I was 9. So I had a lot of mileage, actually, before I ever actually got much formal training. So I developed a lot of skill. And I think that when I was in school, we used to actually, the basic comment was that it took 6 months going to school full time to figure out what you were supposed to be studying. And so from that became the point. So you have to learn, there's a certain point where you have to take and develop a certain coordination between eye and hand. You have to be able to see sizes and shapes and be good at that. And that's going to be different for everybody. I don't know, a lot. But Tim mentioned that it seems like everybody had talked to who's been doing drawing or painting for a long time, they always say, no matter how old they are, that, gee, they just got so much to learn. They've always got to go. Let me read you a little quote. This is my favorite quote, so I've got it in my drawing manual. This is by Hokusai. From the age of 6, I had a mania for drawing the shape of things. When I was 50, I had published a universe of designs. But all I have done before the age of 70 is not worth bothering with. At 75, I've learned something of the pattern of nature of animals, of plants and trees, birds, fish, and insects. When I'm 80, you will see real progress. At 90, I shall have cut my way deeply into the mystery of life itself. At 100, I shall be a marvelous artist. At 110, everything I create, a dot, a line, will jump through life as never before. And to all of you who are going to live as long as I do, I promise to keep my word. I'm writing this in my old age. I used to call myself Hokusai. Today, I sign myself old man, mad about drawing. And that's really, in many respects, that's the parallels of things that I keep finding every time I'm teaching a class or going through anatomy or listening to drawing. I am always learning something. That never stops. And that's what actually makes it sort of neat, that you're always taking and studying. And that's really what it comes down to, because the first thing you're doing is you're developing your skill at how to take and describe form. But then it becomes a question of, what the heck is that form? What is the thing that I'm studying? That's where Hokusai is learning the pattern of things. Well, it's a never-ending process. You're always learning the pattern. Then, of course, you have to interject it. What do you want to take and communicate? What is your own personal thing that you want to say about it? And so that becomes the next level in what you're taking and doing in the drawing. So there's no one way, no one approach. As long as you're making your personal statement, and it's an honest statement, that's fine. There's no rules. Okay. So anyway, okay, now on with the head. Now, one of the things that we're dealing with the mouth now. Okay, the biggest difficulty everybody has with this now, and myself included, I just mentioned that, this last week I just sort of dawned on me something that I should have known a long time ago, and I've sort of known intuitively, but it wasn't really conscious, was exactly how far back the corners of the mouth are in the way the muscles attach. And we really haven't talked that much about the muscles of the face. And so now this is a good time to take and actually start to deal with that a little bit. Now, in fact, and I did this a little bit before class now, to focused on the fact that this part of the mouth, this, if you look at the skull, you can see it's really round. And notice here now, this is one of the things I tried to do in the drawing here a bit. Give you the sense that how the mouth, how the teeth go back in, and the cheek is really sticking out. So this is really small here. It really goes back in. So you're really seeing this whole section through here. Maybe on this plaster here you can see, you get the emphasis of the roundness maybe a little bit more. But it's really round. Okay. Now, what we have is a series of muscles now. And we can start with that you actually have, and this is really, it's referred to, it's called, the round mouth muscle. Okay. But literally wrapping around this ball. But what I think is that the corner where it attaches down the side. So if you're looking at this from the top, just looking at the muzzle part here, you would see the mouth is round like this. The corners are back down here. They're not out on some line out here. It's down the side. Okay. Now, at this point here, you have the round muscles going around the opening of the mouth. Here. These are going around this surface. Now, yet you have this corner here then. Now, one of the things that's different about the muscles of the face is that, with contrast to the muscles of the rest of the body, is that on the face, the muscles don't necessarily attach to bone. And like the round muscles, they're really not attaching to the bone so much. They're really pretty flexible. That's why we can smile and do things. So a lot of them are attached up on one place. Like in the rest of the body, most of the time you got muscles that are attached two places. Well, so now within this now, you have a series of, since we're talking about creating expression, being able to smile, frown, hold back, you have all these muscles that do that. So we have levators, which they can come up and they pull up through in here. You have depressors that they can come through here. There's an angular depressor. You have depressors for the lips coming at diagonals this way. You have muscles that pull up the nose, go up alongside. So you can pretty well figure what muscles are there and where they're going, because the fold that is created by the pull of the muscle is at right angles. In other words, when we smile, we get this fold in here. Okay? Now, that's because what you have two muscles that take in, or actually one main muscle here. It comes from the side, comes down to that corner. Okay? Zygomatic major. Okay. Now, what's important here now is that this is in. See, the zygomatic major is coming from the side here. This is pulling down to this point in here. This way. It's not on a flat surface out here. See, we have this, at this point here, we got the cheekbone sticking out. And notice I put this sort of tone going through in here. This way. Now, this corner is really created by all of your masseter muscles. The muscles that come from underneath the zygomatic arch here and pull down and attach to your mandible, your thing. And you can see there's actually, right at this point, there's a line here. So the muscles are pulling from here down to here. That gives us this sort of a chiseled look that we have across the front here. So what we see then is that this is taking and pulling. In other words, we have this coming through. Well, this is going in an angle. See, we have the cheekbone. This is going, the muscles coming from the side here and going over this way. It's not out on the surface out here. This part here is going back in. So that this is back. You can put this out here. This is back on the side here. It's way back on the side. And so the muscles coming from here or from the side here and going back inside underneath all of this stuff. So we've got this pull, so you can see from here this muscle is coming from the side, not the front, but the outside here. It's coming underneath and it's going in over here around that corner there. Now you have the zygomatic minor, which actually pulls from underneath this. And this is coming across over to here. This way. Now this is the muscle that takes and allows us to take, it's sort of an involuntary muscle. When you snarl, this is the thing that pulls up, pulls your lip up, pulling through in here. This is coming across, but there's nothing to do with this stuff. Okay. So we've got this, so this is a pull, so we've got this shape, and so this goes along then with the general shape that we a lot of times we see. Now let's take and diagram this a little bit more now. Now, what we see is that when we take this part of the bone, this muscle here, the shape that we often look at, when we look at a model, we see this kind of a pull. We see this sort of, it's hollow, taking a line that's taken and created coming through here. That really has to do with this zygomatic major coming down to the corner of the mouth here, which is round. We get this pull coming through. And then we come down, and this is coming out. This goes in, this is coming out, and here's where your masseters are then. Okay. Now, a lot of times you can see this bar. The line actually of muscle, the zygomatic minor, it actually can be quite clear a lot of times on the individual. We can actually feel this pull coming through and pulling it across here. But we can see, if a person is fairly thin, you will see this corner very prominent. The muscles are coming from underneath. We've got this corner coming through. And I'm using a little different tone here now. Coming through this way. Then we're pulling out to here. This now is all this is round. This part, the lips, in other words, this part generally goes back. Or coming out this way. We feel the roundness of this surface now. And we're coming around and we're pulling around through here. Now, we have all of these muscles coming through in here. You also have underneath in here, you have the Buchner muscles, which take and go straight back along the side, on the inside now. So these, you got stuff that's pulling underneath this, pulling back, going in here. Now, there's also some people have dimples. Okay. There's in most of your artist anatomy books, and even some of the medical things, they don't even notice it. And there's actually not everybody's precisely the same. Some people have muscles that other people don't have. Okay. There's a muscle that comes from the same point here. That's actually a very minor muscle, and it goes on the inside in here, and it comes across through over here to the. In the artist books you never even see it. But now you're getting some little Vilpo anatomy. Okay. I think that people who have dimples probably have it. People who don't have dimples probably don't. And somebody can write a doctoral research paper on this. Okay? Now, but what you see is, my theory is that because the fold is at right angle to the pull of a muscle, that's why you got the dimple. Because that's what's creating that pull. Okay? Maybe, I don't know. Do a doctoral research on it and see, yeah. Now, but we get this pull through here. Now, all of this up here, it takes and comes over this now. So now you can see the logic also behind how you're dealing with lines that overlap. And this is the part where almost everybody runs into difficulty by taking and drawing a contour that flattens out the drawing. Because what you have here now, you can see that as we come down to the corners of the eye socket here, the cheekbone comes out from behind. So what we're dealing with now, we've got a line that's coming down, then you have a line that's coming out from behind. And in the way I'm drawing now, you can see that this is pulling down this way, and then the mouth would be coming out in front of that. And the chin then is going back down here. Well, that's on a totally separate, that's a whole separate thing that's coming out from behind that. So you've got a series of overlapping lines that create the sense of volume when you're looking at an edge that's taking and turning away from you. Now, we also have these folds now. We have this stuff that's coming from in here going over this way. Now, that fold then is taken, of course, created by when you take and you smile. And so we find, now this will vary from individual to individual, how much of the skin that you've actually got taking and coming around through here, or how much fat you've got. So that would add a little addition in here. Maybe we've got this coming around, then maybe you're going to have this coming through in here, and you're going to have here, and this is going maybe in between. And as we get older, maybe we start to get a bit of jowls in here, and these lines start to now take and become a little more that takes and wraps around. So all of this stuff is pulling over the surface, but we've got, this is really out. These muscles are going in. They're going into this point here. They're going into this point in here. Okay. So now when we start to take and deal with the lips, then, here's where, again, with the difficulty here is that we tend to create or think in our mind that there is one standard set of lips. There's not. There's an incredible variety. It's best studied by Braille, I think. Okay, but the idea is start really looking at the shapes of these things. Now, when we're taking and drawing this form, I'm going to really slow this section up a little bit now. Thinking of the, generally I'm making this like a half an orange on the surface now. I'm thinking this whole plane that's coming down through here. We're seeing this coming down, so the chin is out here. Now, this also reminds me of a difficulty that comes up when we're taking and talking about the drawing, is that when we start out blocking things in, it's like talking and dealing with the corner of the eye socket or any point. When you start out, we tend to talk about it as if it's some kind of an incredibly precise thing all the time. It's not that precise. You're taking, these are guidelines, that, and depending on how much fat you've got on here, how many wrinkles, what it is, we're all slightly, a little variation. Some have incredibly prominent points, others are a little subtler. These are just sort of things that get you in the neighborhood. And then you have to look at the individual that you're drawing. And so this really now applies to you dealing with the lips. So one of the things we talk about, we have this corner where these muscles attach, and we have this fold now that comes around. Okay. Now, as we pull to this, and you try to actually draw, we're going over the surface. Well, of course, here we've got this point where the muscles are attaching to go around the mouth. This way. Well, as we draw this surface now, it's going to take and we pull, we're actually going around that. And we actually get a point where this is going into here. So what ends up with is a shape in here that we refer to as the pillar of the mouth. We're coming around this surface. We pull around. Now, of course, in the center, we have this continuation of the septum of the nose, except it's a V-shaped. But it can be very subtle, or it can be very, really extreme. Okay. Now, when we look at this, then we have, if I look at the profile here, now we're talking about a surface that is curved, like this, and the chin is coming out from here. So we're dealing with the line that's coming out like this. Then we're going in here. And then the lower lip is going to take and be coming out. And it may be set back or it may be coming out farther, but that's a variation for everybody. Okay. Now, as we go in, so that this is a indented V, the center here as we go in is coming out. Now I'm making this really an extreme here, but it'll vary from the one individual to another now. This will be coming out. And then what we call is referred to as the wings of the lip. Now, this actually, in making this a little exaggerated in size here, a little bringing it up. This is a plane that's going in. The wing is taking and fitting into this. Like this. Now, again, this can be really clear and very extreme, or it can practically not exist. It can be just a simple straight line. But again, if you look at the general characteristics of the thing, these are sort of the things that we work with. Now, if this pulls in over here, so this will take in this surface now, will gradually be rotating in. So we get, this is pushing down to this point here where it's connected. If you're pulling to this, will come down into here. So it is drawing sort of one half coming through. Now, the lower lip is a pad that the upper lip is sitting on. And you can look at it as two volumes in here, like this. I think it's Peck who took and described this as a bird sitting on a nest. That you have the wings, the lip, and then you've got a nest that the bird is sitting on. Which is a simple way of thinking about it, but it gives you the idea. But you actually have, this can be really very puffy. You can have a very clear line in the center, or again, it may not be at all. It may be fairly straight across it, going around the corner, of course. Now, as we go into here, see, we're drawing, we're going over the surface, pulling in. Now, this is a round surface. So you're coming down, you're going around the surface. Now, as you're drawing, you want to feel that now we're pulling. You've got muscles that are pulling this way in here. In other words, the depressors of the lip, the things that pull this down. Oh, pulling this. This is coming down from here. Okay, so we actually end up with a shape. Now we can take and actually draw something like this. Notice the way I'm drawing this is I'm following around the corner here. Now, at this point here, the way this all fits into the chin is a big variable in how you deal with this. It can be really pointed going up like this, where we see coming through. And of course we can have dimples in the chin, where we feel a real depression inside here, this way. Or this can be a straight line very low down here with the chin coming down into here. So this can be actually almost a line going across here this way. It can be straight coming right up next to the lip. So that we're talking about where this, looking at this in profile, where we're hitting this point. It can be hitting up here, it can be hitting down here, it can really go in with the lip sticking out. We can have a variety where it takes and comes down like this, and maybe a little bit of the chin down here. There's no set one way of doing it. There's a lot of variety within how you actually see this section in here. Now we can talk a little bit about the variety of the lips themselves. If we went around, I've done this in class before, is I've gone around and had everybody pose for 2 minutes and we drew their lips, or the noses and their eyes, I think. And what we find, if we take variety now, take the point here, corners of the mouth now, and I'm just drawing this as a straight line, but remember, it's not curved. It always goes around the surface. Okay. Now, first we can start out, let's take out with a very thin lip. We can take in with barely any kind of thing going through here, and this can be just a simple, slightly rounded surface going back like this, and the mouth going back like this. Now that's hardly anything going on there. We can get a little thing, but it's going around the surface. Okay. Now, if we start to look at the variety of this, now we take and let's change it. Now we can make this really, say, going up a little bit bigger, or even quite a bit bigger here. Now, I'm going to do two things here at the same time. Okay, first, and these are the two big variations of them. And you have to sort of look, because there's a whole, these are sort of the two main things, but then there's variations within that. We can say, well, the lip goes up like this, it's curved this way, and then pulling down. Or the exact opposite is both of these are pretty standard now. The exact opposite. Okay. Now, we can take within this now. We can say, well, all right, let's take and look at that again. Now, I've been drawing these lips all the way out here to the corners of the mouth. But what we see is that's not necessarily even what we would consider a standard. You find that maybe, we think of little kids. Kids come down, we've got this cupid, what do we call it? Cupid lip. This is really coming down like this. And then this is out here. Now, I've been drawing these fairly size-wise now. Of course, then these can take and be, we can really start to see the variations on this. This can be really quite full this way. And you can have an exaggerated kind of pull to this. Well, I wouldn't say exaggerated, but say we can make this really, really full through here. And I guess it's fairly fashionable to take and pump stuff in there to make them even fuller. Giving some shots to make them puffier. Now, the lower lip. Okay, here I drew this nest. Well, in the cupid one here, we can see where that would be just this little small thing. Now, one of the things, notice that what I've done here is that I took and just focusing on that lower lip right for a second. That I took and drew this as coming out like this. In fact, see where there isn't we don't feel this sort of cushiony shape like I'm drawing in here. In other words, I'm not making this indentation there, I'm making it something that's coming out, which again is quite normal. Okay. So we can take, and here I've got this really long extension. I can take and make a rather full lip here coming out and give it this. We can take and start pulling in. Through in here. We can take and really create a rather full, but without even taking it to the end. So the variety of it's endless. There's no one thing. So each individual, then you really have to look at it. That everybody is different. Some of them are really extreme. Some can be very thin. No, I've got fairly thin lips. Yeah. No lip. Okay. Straight, hard, flinty. That's no. Now, maybe that's for the Nordic blood that we're taking, trying to protect us from the cold air. So this is a tremendous amount of variety when you're dealing with this. But the hard part is that you're going around the surface. So when you start looking, we have these things now. Part of the thing is we're saying that this center part fits into this. So if this is going around slightly around a corner here, see that this is really a curved surface we're coming out here. And we're going around the corner. You have to now start seeing the overlapping, like I'm taking and trying to draw this stuff, the overlapping is coming around. So that as we go through, that this is going to come down, you're going to get a foreshortening in here. It's going to come down. So this line is coming in front here. This is, say, pulling in front of the lip here. And we may see the center coming through, and we're coming around. This is going back. So you have these planes that are you seeing over. They're coming through. So these become, again, the basic drawing skills now, talking about how you take and describe these forms, one fitting and one overlapping the next. Now, going back to the way of taking and drawing this, and let's take something a little darker here so I can exaggerate a little bit. Now, so as I'm coming through, as we're working around and start dealing with all of these, say if we've got extra folds, what have you, taking and first we feel the slight indentation taking place at this point. You feel there's a slight pull in here. The lip is pulling into this. Okay. As we go over, we feel there's a plane here. As we start to go around. And depending on the number of folds you've got, in other words, if you start creating the jowls, you start creating the lines coming around, you may have, from here, you may have another part starting over here. And which is really quite common now. And without even necessarily going into a major thing down here, we may have something coming through. Then we're working and creating the way this pulls out. And pulling this up and literally drawing these surfaces going back and pulling up into here. Regardless of exactly how this is going to fit in there, you still have this sort of curved surface that you're working on. Okay, this is a ball. This is a round ball that you're working. You're going over this surface. And we're coming around. And so each one of these things, so this becomes a plane. And even the chin then, when we start to work over the chin, we're coming around. This surface will be, there's a plane. You're feeling the surface going over. We're going around over this surface all the time. So you're taking and feeling these planes. Then, of course, underneath, you may get a few extra planes, taking and starting to pull. But maybe in the next session we'll take and actually go into some of the anatomy of going into the neck and what have you to take and carry this next step farther into the figure. But this is what you need to really feel, this roundness. You're always working over the surface. You're going over the surface. You're feeling stuff coming from behind, feeling the pull, feeling one line in front of another line, feel things wrapping around. So we pull these things and we take and feel stuff coming through and coming down. You're working around the pillars with my mouth, no, going around the corner back in here. Feel them coming out, going through, pulling in, and I'll draw a little different configuration here, drawing this down this way. And we can feel this pulling through. So now you can see how all this is really generated now by where the shape of the bone, roundness of the mouth itself, where the corners of the muscles are attaching, where these things are pulling back. You got muscles that are pulling, you got the muscles that are pulling up. You can feel it coming through. You got the stuff coming across. Now, like I say, this will maybe only be activated if there's something coming, but a lot of times, even when you're talking, a rather thin person, you may see this bar coming across here fairly clearly. My wife, you can see this very clearly, usually, a lot of times. You know? So we take and you're building, you're seeing, you can see why we get this hollow coming across this way. You can see why we see this shape in here, because that's where your masseter muscles are coming down. And then the jowls, our baby fat, is kept migrating. Okay. Gravity has taken over. Okay. Now, the other part that you need to take into consideration here is the actual angle that you're working with. As we take and start with now, the nose is fitting into this curved surface. This is coming down and fitting into the chin. Now, I mentioned this earlier in previous weeks here, that this is not necessarily a straight line, and generally isn't a straight line coming down. As the nose comes out, we can take and start to see that in more of a standard probably would be that the upper lip sticks out a little bit. The lower lip tends to be set back a little bit. And so we can start to actually see an angle, say, from here to here, running up to where the nose is. But that's only a line to look for. It's not necessarily the same for everybody. And in fact, now the chin can take it and be back here, or it can be way out here. This lip may be out in front here. I know when I'm talking here, my lower lip tends to be out. My upper lip's nothing in. It tends to be out rather than set back. Okay? So that's probably the idea. Now we take but you can see the variety. This could be curved out instead of in. The chin could be going out here, we could start to play out here. So you have to look very carefully at the alignment of which these things go. So that's a real strong, or really important part that you need to take and be careful of. Now, since we're talking about this, one of the major mistakes that people tend to make, and when we're drawing the model, is that when somebody tilts their head forward like that, and I'll just take and add this on here, that when the head tilts forward, in other words, we're talking about an angle going this way. that you have to be careful. It's what happens is the tendency is to make this chin sort of come out this way. We tend to unhinge the face. So you have to really look to see where this line is, so that you don't take and just let this chin take and start rotating out in here. Now that's a major mistake that you see all the time. And I'm conscious of it because I did it for years. It's something you do, and you got to be very careful of. Okay. Now, I want to take and talk about the ears, but let's take at the same time do a little bit of recapping again, as usual. Go back over some of the basic stuff that we've been doing. And I'm just getting a question, okay. I think there's still a lot of question about what the basic procedure, how to go about doing this. And every artist finds variations in the basic theme of how to take and go about it. And depends on what your focus is, your personality, what you're interested in. But you still come down to the final thing is that if you're trying to do something accurate, you have to compare one thing to another. You're always comparing where things are in space. Two-dimensionally, it's on a flat piece of paper, so we always have to take this into consideration. Now, some people are more shape-orientated, others are more structurally orientated, but you have to develop that sense of, okay, how far, how big, what value things are. And that just takes mileage, okay? Now, going back over sort of basic procedure here a little bit, and we'll dealing with the, then we'll get into the ear. Now, I'm going to take and draw this not simple straight front view now. I'm talking about maybe 3/4 looking down a little bit. And so first thing I do is you're looking at the model, you try to orientate which way it's going. We'll try to really just see this. So in doing that, I really start out with and I'm obviously pretty much orientated towards dealing with form, 3D form. And that's really, but still the fact that we're working on a flat piece of paper. Okay. So now, as I'm doing this, then I'm thinking, okay, going through, and actually I would also be thinking, well, the idea of where the neck is. Okay. And the first thing I look for is where's the corner of the eye socket. In other words, where's this corner at? And not necessarily even drawing it on the paper, but as being a way of looking at the model to see which way it's orientated. And looking at the line across the brow, and the line from the corner of the brow to the top of the ear. That tells you the kind of angle that you're getting. So that really becomes a beginning point. So when I look to that point, so in other words, I would be looking to see this line to that line. Well, I don't necessarily draw that, but I do look at it, but I am taking in, and I will take in pretty mechanically in a way, take and visualize where the center is, halfway, and then I'll come through and I'll draw that ellipse through. But that's based on what I'm seeing when I look at these points. So then I'll come through and I think, well, okay, this is going that way. Now, obviously, you don't have to draw that ellipse. Michelangelo used a simple line, taking the same consideration. So he used a simple line of going across the brow and the line going down to indicate the nose, which is a T. It does the same thing. There's no one way of doing this. It's the idea that you are trying to orientate where things are. So then I will come back in and I will draw this. Now, but I'm really thinking that this is not a straight line, really. It's a curved surface. the sphere is curved. So I'm taking into consideration that it is a three-dimensional form. And I will come in and take and hit where that ear is. So I'm going back to what I was looking at to start with. Okay. So now from there, come back in and say, well, okay, now the bottom of the nose is halfway between the brow and the chin. Okay. Now, this again is fairly mechanical, right? Just getting my proportions. Now, going through this, I'll say, well, okay, now, really looking at the angle of the eye socket and the actual shape that you see. So I'm really visualizing this plane, but I may draw this line, I may not line that. When teaching, I generally do it all the time. But for myself, maybe not. Okay. If you can see it, you don't need to draw it. You just go to the point. Okay. Now, I will come out and right away and hit the corner of the cheek, corner of the cheek. Now this is going to vary, of course, with the person, whether the cheeks are in or farther out, or how high, or how long. So you're really looking at the length of lines that you're drawing. Now, one of the difficulties with the pose where the head is slightly tilted is the natural tendency is to take and make the chin hinge out. So I'll check verticals, maybe whether I'm talking about the center here or whether I'm coming out from here. I just look to get a sense of how far in that chin is. So that's a reference point. Just like using horizontals across to take and get a reference. In other words, I can use a line at the bottom of the nose to see how far up this ear is. Well, it's also would be part of the thing. Alignment is drawing an ellipse around. So we're taking and getting it. Now, from this point, I'm coming through and I'm thinking, where's the halfway in the head? And I say, well, I may have to add more to the back of the head. Just so I'm basically thinking of the actual skull as I'm doing the drawing. So you're trying to understand the thing. Now, here's where there's a combination of both very definitely 3D, but also 2D. In other words, when I'm taking and coming and blocking the nose, I'm thinking, well, there's this plane here. I'm really thinking the base of the nose down here. But we had that superciliary bone we've talked about so much coming through here. So I look at this shape. I'm looking at the thickness of the nose coming through, coming down to the base of the nose. And then as I draw this end coming out, okay, we've got the bottom down here, they come out from here. I really, very carefully now, I look at the distance, two-dimensionally, of the end of that nose to the cheek. And the sort of triangulation between this point and that point. So it's very definitely a two-dimensional thing. But I'm looking at 3D form. So you have to correlate this. It's a flat piece of paper. Yet we're drawing a three-dimensional thing, and the idea is to create this sense of three dimension. And you're doing the drawing now. So I'm coming through in here. And so then I think, well, okay, I visualize, actually draw that cone or the half of a circle sphere for the mouth. But again, this helps me to understand what forms are overlapping, and I will look at the shape now as the muscles, the fat stuff come over the cheek here, of pulling this thing down, the form that this comes in front, but it's behind this, and then start to look carefully at the overlapping of how one form overlaps the other. So 3D, 2D, looking very carefully at how far apart this is. What's the alignments? Where do these things go? So you're dealing with all of these elements now. So I'm thinking, well, this is pulling around. The corner of the jaw lines up with the opening of the mouth. The bottom of the lower lip is halfway. Coming through, and I'm visualizing this coming across. But again, I would actually look at the two-dimensional thing. Where does it line up? So it's a reference point. So as we're going through this thing, you're continually checking, but before too far, in other words, when you're looking at the model, we don't normally see, unless you're drawing somebody with a hairdo like mine, you don't normally necessarily see the skull that clearly. Okay? You see the shape of the hair. So it becomes relevant then to take and come in and draw the shape. But again, being very careful of the distances, the shape that the thing makes. And they find that a lot of times for drawing shapes like this that are complex like hair, and even with the face, a lot of times you find it's much easier if you're using more straight lines. And so that you get much clearer differences between things when you're using straights. So I'll take, and you're breaking it down. So say we got coming out here, through, coming down, whatever the configuration of that hair is, but you're looking to try to see how these forms are actually going. That's a good idea to take and put the pit of the neck in. In other words, we would see that the distance from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin is roughly to give us a distance down to the pit of the neck. So seeing that pit of the neck and checking. Now, when I come in and start to deal with the eyes, again, I really look very precisely at the shapes that I see, but I'm also dealing with a round, simple forms. And it's having, there's a duality here now. This is really, I remember in school we had one of the instructors said, well, to take and draw something really round, you have to learn to see flat. In other words, he was saying, be able to look at the model, or whatever it is you're drawing, and see flat shapes, so that you can translate it onto a flat piece of paper. And then to take and be able to take and see form, though, be able to describe form three-dimensionally, to take and then make that into an illusion of three dimension. And so that illusion of three dimension, though, can be gotten a lot of different ways. You can take and copy exactly the light that you see, or you can use conventions for taking in rendering form to take and make it look three-dimensional. There's no right way, there's just the way you want to do it. There's no rules in this stuff. It's just basically my cliche tools, nothing but tools. So you can do it. So as I start working into that eye, I'm very conscious of the structure now. Here's where I really focus on understanding the anatomy so that I recognize what I'm looking at. So as I draw this, I'm really thinking of the bony structure. I'm thinking of the structure of the superciliary bone. I'm very consciously thinking of the planes of the head. So I'm taking all of these things we talk about all the time into consideration as I'm drawing this head. Okay. Now, what I do then, I say, well, okay, now I'm thinking of the bone, thinking of the corner of the cheeks coming across. I place the eyeball in there, and I literally draw a ball, so that I'm very conscious of the distance that that ball is away from the corners of where the bone would be. Thinking of the planes, there's not just simple flat planes, there's a variety of shapes that those planes come in depending on the individual. You have to look at the shape though. So now they come through, then I'll take and looking at the shape that I see, I draw the lines, but I'm seeing a three-dimensional ball that I'm drawing the lines over. But I'm looking very carefully again at the distance between that line and where the brow comes, or whether it's a shadow. I use shadows just as much as any other flat shape that I see to help me orientate where things are. So if it's a certain shadow in here, when I look carefully, how wide is that shadow in here? What kind of a shape is that shadow taking and creating. I'm looking at it as purely two-dimensional shapes to help me place these three-dimensional forms. So I'm still, as I'm looking at these distances, then I'm still taking and looking, drawing the lines that I go over based on making those lines conform to this three-dimensional volume. But I'm looking at very, very specific. I do look at the 2D shape of it because it's a flat piece of paper. And so I'm training myself to look at the model flat. But mentally, I'm thinking three-dimensionally forms. So you're combining. Well, the reality, again, I keep saying this, the reality is a flat piece of paper. So you have to make that translation. So we're coming through then, we're taking and looking at these shapes, we're looking at this stuff. And depending on the kind of drawing you're doing, it determines how you modify the shapes, how you emphasize things. If you're taking and dealing with expression, how we push it. If you're characterizing something, how you can take and make it a little larger. The more emotion you put into the drawing, the less constrained you are to holding on to those flat shapes. You exaggerate things. You make things smaller, you make things larger. You're composing the drawing, you adjust these things. So you're not, this is just the beginning point. It gets you in the starting mode, then you take and work from it. Then it's your personality and your own artistic intent that you work with. So once we've got, so this really becomes the point. So when you're taking dealing with tone then, and a little bit later we'll take and start dealing with the tone, is the tone again is used to take and describe the form, but it's also a artistic intent. Whether you want to take and deal with light, or you're dealing with the simple atmosphere of how the values of the form, or whether you're trying to show exactly the tones that you see, or it just becomes, the tone becomes an expressive tool of yours. You can go any which way you want with that. But within, there are certain constraints, but anyway, the main thing I have approached to is describing the form. So the lines that I use will generally correspond to the form, going over the surface and around. And we're taking and using the light as a way of taking and describing the form. Now, when you're saying using the light the way you're describing the form, you can very rigorously take and make the light conform to the reality of the way the light actually works. Doesn't have to, though. Now, you can take and be very, very conscious of the subtle changes of tone according to where your light source is. And you can take and push it to taking and reducing it down to two light sources, reflected light and a direct light source. It depends on, do you want to deal with, are you interested in a very light picture or a very heavy dark picture? It's a matter of personal choice. Again, so there's no rules in this process. It's the more control you have, the more opportunities you have for taking and doing it. So here, like the idea, simple ideas of using sharp edges and soft edges. The use of a core. Well, how you work with that depends on how well you actually understand the form that you're drawing. So the anatomy becomes critical, but again, the anatomy is only important if you don't know it. If you know it, it's not really that important. And that goes for, that's like perspective. Perspective is very important if you don't know it. If you know it, it's not important. That's not true. The picture isn't perspective. The picture isn't anatomy. those are just tools. Those are just part of the process of learning. So, okay. So now, so this is really the basic procedure that I really go through. Just refining the drawing then as you go. More knowledge you have, but it's a form and shape and quality of line, and these are all artistic considerations that you're taking and working with. Now, let's take and go in. We haven't talked about the ears. Okay. Now, the ears. When you talk about ears, ears are actually something that you use for a lot of different ways now. One, I use the ear as a way of taking and showing which way the head is going. We started out here saying, looking, well, here I've drawn hair over it, but here, say, you're at the top of the ear, coming down to here. Well, that immediately is telling me about orientation of where the head is. Now, if I'm taking and doing a fairly quick drawing, say I'm doing from the back, the ear, again, is telling me an awful lot about the direction of the head, and combined even with just a hint of where the corner of the eye socket is, it's telling which way the head is going. So just where we are. Now, all kinds of ears. Okay. First, you have to take a look at the fact that the ears, looking at the top of the head here, now looking down. The ears stick out. This way. Actually, they take and sort of interesting. Why all of these different curves and stuff you have in your ear? And actually, research has shown that they really function to take and show the direction that the sound is coming from. Okay. In my case, it doesn't work well. Okay. The idea, this is what it is. Now, what we have behind the ear is really referred to as the cup. Now, we're drawing from the back. You see we have the cup of the ear, and then we have the ear proper, the lobes sitting on that. Okay. Now, remember that this point of the ear here is actually the front corner here is literally the halfway point on the head. And that cross-lining with that and the eyes give you the center of the head in profile. Now, so this is you got too little shy here. So we have to come out a little bit farther. Okay. Now, the shape that the ear makes, everybody is different. You have the same difference between shapes of ears you have between fingerprints. They're all unique. But it does not necessarily stay the same all the time either. As you get older, your ear continues to grow. This part will start getting longer and longer. Okay, this you can start drooping. Okay. Now, we can take and start. There's a basic pattern for the ear. Now we'll go through the basic point to start with. Okay. Up, down, through here. Now even this is not so basic because they're not so constant. Because I'm saying there's a bit of a lobe here. Well, that shape maybe doesn't have a lobe. Maybe this is coming down straight like that. And even this, all of this is a variable. We'll talk a little bit about that. But you have the top part coming through. This comes down, pulls in. We're connected to the head at this point. And we pull around here. We have a point here. Now, this is going. Now from here, you have essentially, this is the basic shape. And this going inside, of course, and going into in here. Now, practically nobody has this perfect little look like that. Now, from here, this shape, we can take and go practically flat across like this. We can take and go really up like elf ears. We can take and have all kinds of configurations. But nobody is the same. They're really different. Okay. You can start looking at the shape that we go inside here. Well, maybe someone's going to go in fairly tight like this and really broad up here. And I was drawing this as sort of like having an edge here like that. Well, quite often you see this is coming up and it's basically flattens out here, and we have no curve coming down here, and we'll come through. This will stop down. We feel this going in. It's sort of interesting if you take and go and look at all the reproductions of Renaissance artists. Try to find the ears. You know, there's not an awful lot of ears for you. Take it, and it's sort of interesting. You don't think about it, but you don't really see a lot of ears. Okay? Now, when you start coming down to here, this, by the way, this distance, where you're actually connected from here to here, actually, if it is connected here, or that this distance from here to here actually correlates fairly closely with the distance between the ear and the corner of the jaw. In other words, this physical point, the physical connection point, corresponds to the distance from there to the corner of the jaw. Not perfect, but in general. And if you think of that, you'll find that it will help you to avoid the sort of common mistake that is made of taking and not showing this dropping down of the jaw. It's quite often what you see in drawings of people drawing the jaw as if it was going like this, which it doesn't. It sets down. It's a very, animation, cartooning, you see that all the time. It really looks sort of dumb. Now, so we look at the shape. Now, one of the things that as you look at the head from straight front view, okay, the ears are sticking out. Of course, that varies. Some people stick way out, and some people are really pinned back against the head. Okay. But as you're drawing this, you try to visualize the actual. So when I'm drawing this, looking from the front, I actually try to see that this has thickness, that it's going back. So there's a plane that's going back away, going around, coming through. Is curving in. So you're actually visualizing this as a cylinder that's taking and going back. Now, the lobe and you find that this will vary really quite a bit sometimes with ethnically, is that the lobe can drop straight down or can flip out a bit. In little kids, you see this a lot, where they're coming down, as this comes down, and we see this takes a real dramatic push out this way. And we get through, feel the pull going in, and we're coming around through and here. So again, these are pretty much variables that you have to take and look at. Just like everything else we've talked about. We've talked about eyes and nose and mouth. The ear has as much or more variety than any of those things. So you have to look. Now, one of the things here we're talking about this shape is to take and really be conscious of the fact where we're connecting. A lot of times, actually, quite often you find model there is no lobes going down. Or it can be quite a bit as you get older going down. I had one of my instructors was a Joe Henniger, and very distinguished gentleman. He had these slits in his ear. And it was a big thing. Nobody really wanted to have. Finally, somebody asked him, okay, what's the story with the slits? And what it was that as a young painter, he was in Spain, in the Basque country of Spain. And he wanted to go out on the boats painting. He was a classically trained artist with Beaux-Arts and everything. And they kept saying, yeah, you go out. And so finally he said, but they never let him go out. And they said, well, what's the problem? Why can't you go out? And he said, well, it's a matter of superstition. You don't have a ring in your ear. That would be bad luck. And he said, well, that's no problem. Let's get my ears pierced. And he said, oh, okay. So he put his head down on the table and took a knife and went, boom, stuck a ring in his ear. Okay. And so he went out on the boats, drawing. But for years, you can see it. I mean, these were not little holes, pinholes. These were really for heavy gold rings that were in the ear. And it was pretty, actually, very distinguished. He used to do liquor ads. He was a well-known illustrator too. But, anyway, so the ear, you have to look at the ear. You look at the shape, but two-dimensionally and three-dimensionally.